So what is sampling? Sampling is a process we use basically to go out and try and determine the entire characteristics of a population. So think about it this way. If I told you to go out into the field and determine which species are present or absent at your field site, you would have a hard time going through the entire field site in order to determine what's there and what's not. So instead, what we do is we sample it, we subsample it, we break it up into manageable chunks and then kind of use those samples to estimate what's happening on the larger scale. The thing about sampling is that you never actually know the true value of the entire area. So each sample you take, you assume is indicative of what's there. But in fact, the more samples that you take, the better estimate you have of what's going on in your field site. So something else we want to be careful of when we're sampling is making sure that we're getting good replication. So replication is actually repeating your sampling system over and over again. So increasing your replication is a way to kind of limit the variability around your sampling and make sure that you're getting a close to the true estimate of what's actually happening at your field site. And the last thing that's probably the most important part, and this will feed into our next section on experimental design and setup, is called standardized sampling. Basically, the idea here is that you want each of your samples to be collected in the same way with no biases from one sample to the next sample. So standardization is actually really important when you're taking your samples because you want to make sure that each sample that you take was collected in the same way as the other samples that you've been taking. So it's a little hard to explain here in the lab, so why don't we actually head into the field and I'll give you a better idea of what I mean there. Welcome to my field site. As you can see, we have a lot of area to cover, so let's get to sampling. Alright, so the first rule is ensure that each sample is representative of your study site. That means as a marine biologist, I probably shouldn't be setting up my quadrats and transects here in the dirt. Instead, it's probably better for me to be laying these transects and quadrats out in the intertidal zone. Rule number 2, take as many samples as possible. That means, given my time and resources, I should probably try to maximize the number of quadrats that I'm throwing. Rule number 3, standardize sampling methods to minimize biases. That means I should probably measure out exactly where I'm going to be putting my quadrats, and I should make sure to use the metric side of the tape every single time. If I've also committed to using a large quadrat, I should commit to using that throughout all of my sampling, even if it's tempting to use a smaller one and get done faster. And finally, rule number 4, add replicates. This could be as simple as doubling the number of quadrats that I take and spreading them out over multiple transects at the same study site. Basically, the more samples that I take, the more confident I'll be that I'm actually capturing what's happening at my field site.